The final and largest fresco was the most baffling. It showed the king alone holding the crystalline object. A beam of light shot from it into the sky, and then he was gone. The throne room was empty. The courtiers were shown kneeling around nothing. The city was depicted as being abandoned, not in war or disaster, but in a quiet, orderly exodus, as if a great purpose had been fulfilled and their work was done.
The next sequence showed him leading his people in the construction of this very city. Then, the tone shifted. The sky and the paintings darkened. A great, shadowy object blotted out the sun. The people were shown in postures of terror and supplication. The king was depicted in a private chamber deep within the temple, communing with the elongated beings. They were giving him something, a small, crystalline object that pulsed with light.
I switched on my headlamp and stepped inside. The air was cold and still, smelling of wet stone and immense age. The interior was a single large chamber. My light beam danced across the walls and I gasped. They were covered in frescoes, their colors miraculously preserved by the sealed environment. They told a story. The first panels showed a king, Jayavarman, I was sure of it, being crowned, but instead of receiving his crown from a Hindu god, he was receiving it from a group of those same elongated, elegant beings who were descending from a brilliant starlit object in the sky.
They worshipped the sky, Sak said, his voice a whisper of awe. It was more than worship. It was an obsession. We reached the central temple, a structure that was more stepped pyramid than mountain temple. It was oriented not to the east like most Khmer temples, but precisely north, aligning with the pole star. The entrance was a gaping maw of darkness, guarded by two magnificent but terrifying Dvarapalas, not the usual stern guardians, but figures whose faces were contorted in a silent scream, their eyes wide with what looked like fear or revelation.
My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, Lingapura, the city from the steel, the city of the silent king. We walked down a central avenue, the stone paving slabs buckled and tossed aside by the inexorable push of tree roots. The architecture was distinctly Khmer, yet wrong. The carvings were not the epic Hindu narratives of the Ramayana or the battles of the gods I was used to. They were astronomical. I saw detailed maps of constellations, planets moving in precise orbits, and figures, seemingly human, yet elongated and elegant, pointing to the heavens.
On the other side, the world changed. The jungle opened up into a vast clearing, but it was not empty. It was a city, or the ghost of one. Towers, not of the familiar lotus bud shape of Angkor, but sharper, more pyramidal, pierced the canopy. The structures were smaller, more intricate, and in a state of decay far more advanced than anything at Angkor. This was not a place slowly being reclaimed. It was a place that had been returned, forcefully, to the earth long, long ago.
The causeway led us to a collapsed gateway, a gupura, so thoroughly fused with the jungle it was more tree than temple. A stone deva, a guardian god, stared out from a web of roots, its serene smile both welcoming and warning. We had to crawl on our hands and knees through a narrow tunnel formed by fallen lintels to enter.
So we listened. We left the well-trodden paths of the Angkor Archaeological Park, plunging into the dense, untamed wilderness to the west. The air grew thicker, the light dimmer, filtered through a canopy that had stood for 1,000 years. We waded through streams where leeches waded like eager black kamas, and brushed aside vines that clung with the desperation of the drowning. For days, we found nothing but the relentless, indifferent green. Then, on the third day, Sok stopped dead. He placed a calloused hand on a moss-covered laterite block, half swallowed by the roots of a strangler fig. "This is not nature," he murmured. The block was too square, too perfect. Excitement, sharp and electric, shot through me. We began to see more of them, a scattered line of stones forming a faint, overgrown causeway leading away from the beret, deeper into the jungle's heart.
The lake that mirrors the heavens was the West Beret, the massive reservoir west of Angkor Thom, and the silent king, that had to be Jayavarman IX. The official records were silent on him. The title fit. My theory, ridiculed by my peers, was that he hadn't vanished. He had built his own capital, a separate, secret complex, and had been written out of history for reasons I could only guess at. Heresy, defeat, madness. I hired a guide, a man named Sok, whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles and whose eyes held the deep, patient stillness of the jungle itself. He did not dismiss my theories. He simply listened, then said, "The jungle keeps its secrets. It does not give them up to those who shout. You must listen." For months, I had lived in the shadow of Angkor Wat, deciphering the bas-reliefs that marched like stone soldiers along its galleries. I knew the stories of Suryavarman II, the builder, and Jayavarman VII, the great restorer. But the period between them was a historical fog, and in that fog was my king. The clue that brought me here was a folio from the travelogues of a 13th century Chinese diplomat, Zhao Daoguan. Most scholars focused on his vivid descriptions of Angkor's daily life, but a single, cryptic line, often dismissed as a scribal error, had captivated me. To the west of the city of the God King, beyond the lake that mirrors the heavens, lies the sanctuary of the Silent King, where the stones speak in the tongue of stars.
The silence of the Khmer jungle is not an absence of sound, but a presence. It is a heavy, living blanket of heat, buzzing insects, and the slow vegetative pulse of things growing and decaying over centuries. It was into this green, suffocating world that I stumbled, a historian chasing the ghost of a king. My name is Dr. Aris Thorne, and I had come to Cambodia seeking not just a forgotten city, but a lost soul, a monarch who vanished from history so completely it was as if the jungle itself had swallowed him whole. My quest was for King Jayavarman IX, a name found on a single crumbling stele, a ruler who presided over the greatest architectural marvel the ancient world ever produced, and then nothing. No record of his death, no grand tomb, no lineage. Just a void in the chronicles of an empire that carved its story in stone more diligently than any other.